Gonzaga is 2-0 on the season with one blowout victory and one really close matchup. It just wasn't the two games that you were expecting.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Monday, and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by FanDuel. Folks, place your first $5 bet, and you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win. Just visit FanDuel.com today to get started. Well, it wasn't pretty by any stretch of the imagination. It was a frustrating, challenging game for Gonzaga at home against the Arizona State Sun Devils, but they do secure a victory. They're now 2-0 on the season. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, some of the things we saw from the bench, some of the things we saw from the starters, what it all means for Gonzaga going forward. We're also going to close out today's show talking about Gonzaga's women's team and their loss to Stanford. That game was pretty ugly from the get-go, but this is a young team, and they got some valuable experience from that game. We start with Gonzaga's second straight game to open up the season against a Big 12 opponent. And I noted this when right at the end of the game, and I thought it was a kind of a funny anecdote to share here. For those of you who listened to the preview episode of the Baylor game, one of the things I talked about in that game as a projection for how that contest would go was that I expected it was going to be a close game throughout, consistently within just a handful of possessions, but that ultimately Gonzaga would cover the spread. I think the spread was 3.5 points, something like that, and would win by 8. I specifically predicted 8-point victory for Gonzaga because Caleb Battle would knock down a bunch of free throws at the end of the game. Obviously, that prediction for how the Gonzaga-Baylor game was going to go was wildly incorrect. However, that is basically exactly how Sunday afternoon's game for Gonzaga against the Arizona State Sun Devils went. They won 88-80, an 8-point victory because Caleb Battle made 4 free throws down the stretch for Gonzaga. It was a 1 to 2 possession game for the majority of the second half, but Gonzaga ultimately won. Now, I didn't project Gonzaga would beat Arizona State by 38 points, although I did expect they would win by 15, 20, something like that, if not more. So we basically just flipped. At the end of the day, it's the first week of the college basketball season. The Zags are 2-0. They have one blowout victory. They have one close victory. That's what everybody thought was going to happen. It just happened that they came against different opponents. Watching that game in the second half, watching that entire game was really not fun. I get it. I was there with you all. It was stressful and frustrating to see Gonzaga seemingly regress from such a dominant first game. But if you gave me a choice, would you rather beat Baylor by 38 points and sneak by Arizona State or flip it? I still think I would take what happened. It was cathartic to beat Baylor the way that we did. The fact that Baylor then turned around and beat Arkansas over the weekend, another ranked team, makes Gonzaga look better. And yes, too close for comfort win over Arizona State is not fun, but Gonzaga learned some things. They took some of these lessons with them. They know that they can't just coast to easy victories after what they did to Baylor. So I think all in all, we can't really be too bummed about how this went, even though, again, wasn't super fun to watch on Sunday afternoon. The good news, or the good things we saw, then we'll talk about some not so good things. Then we'll recap the 5 keys to victory that we laid out for this game. The bench was fantastic, and we're going to talk about them more in the second segment. So I'm not ignoring Braden Huff's performance or Michael Ajayi's performance. We'll talk about them later in the show, but want to start with Ryan Nembhard. 13 points, 11 assists, 0 turnovers. Ryan Nembhard now has a 4-game streak of having 10 or more, or 11 or more assists. Is from Jared Benson of ESPN, Stats and Information. He has a 4-game streak, dating back to last year, of course, of 11 or more assists, 0 turnovers in a game. The only other player to do that is Iowa State's Monty Morris, who did it in like 2015, 2016 season, something like that. Ryan Nembhard's going to lead the country in assists. This is one of my bold predictions coming into the season. It doesn't even look that bold anymore for him to have done this for Gonzaga in 2 games. And again, they didn't play great here, but they did still score 88 points. The defense was the issue. Nembhard to have back-to-back games of 10 or more assists and 0 turnovers against very good defensive teams. Again, Gonzaga scored a whole bunch of points against Baylor. They scored a whole bunch of points against Arizona State, but those are two good defensive teams. When Gonzaga plays bad defensive teams, Nembhard's going to continue to put up these kinds of numbers. He was also 3 of 6 from the field. He nailed his 1 3-point attempt, which was a deep one. He was 6 of 8 from the free throw line. Really strong performance from Ryan in a game where Gonzaga needed all of it from him in order to make sure they secured a victory. The other good thing was Caleb Battle's second half. Battle did not score in the first half. The entire starting lineup really didn't play well in the first half of this game. In fact, they had 15 points in the first half as an entire starting lineup. But Battle had 19 points on the night, all of them coming in the second half of this game. He was 3 of 6 from 3. He hit 2 of them in a quick succession in a stretch that should have given Gonzaga a 10-plus point lead and put them on the easy path to victory. Gonzaga went down and knocked down like 4 or 5 shots in a row, but the defense just was not stopping anybody, and Arizona State continued to hang with them. Battle also went 8 of 8 from the free throw line. That's what he's going to do. That's what Caleb Battle is going to do. He's going to knock down 3-point shots. He's going to catch fire and be a heat seeker at times. And he's also going to get to the free throw line a lot, and he's going to bury them at an exceptionally high rate. 19.7 rebounds, 8 of 8 from the free throw line, 3 made threes. Really strong game from Caleb Battle. And again, Gonzaga really needed it. The Zags also out-rebounded Arizona State 38-28, 10-point advantage on the boards. Really needed that. Michael Ajayi had 12 of them off the bench. I posited this on Twitter during the game, and he did not get a double-double in this one because he only had 9 points. But I think that Michael Ajayi is going to get a whole heck of a lot of double-doubles this year, and if he continues to come off the bench, I don't know what Gonzaga's single-season record is for double-doubles from a player who does not start, but I wouldn't be surprised if Michael Ajayi ultimately breaks that record. Again, assuming the starting lineup does not change going forward this season. Gonzaga also had a 19-9 advantage in fast break points. Most of them came in the first half, but it was good to see them get out and run against a team that was trying to slow them down. They also had 22 assists and 8 turnovers compared to 8 assists and 10 turnovers for Arizona State. Again, this game ended up too close for comfort because of a lot of issues Gonzaga had defensively, but they had a big advantage on the boards, a big advantage in fast break points, and a big advantage in assists to turnovers, which really helped them secure the victory overall. The bad news, Gonzaga's defensive rotations were atrocious in this game. They were a step late constantly. Arizona State does not run a particularly complicated offense. For large chunks of the first half, they didn't look like they were running an offense. It was just a lot of passing and then shooting without any screens or any movement. And then we saw them kind of get a little bit more comfortable doing some ball screen actions. And Gonzaga was very, very slow to rotate. The amount of wide open 3-point shooters, players not rotating on screens. Well, I mean, the defense looked really, really bad. Compared to how good they looked against Baylor, it was a shocking decline in Gonzaga's defense. Baylor's a better team than Arizona State. They did not look like it, but when the season comes around, that will bear itself out. I can almost guarantee you that. And this Arizona State team played well in this game. They deserve credit. I'm not trying to take anything away from them. Bobby Hurley came in with a solid game plan. Bashir Jihad played outstanding, 22 points, 10 rebounds for him. This team played really well in this game, and they do deserve some credit. But Gonzaga's defense was not good at all. Arizona State shot about 48% in this game. They had 42 points in the paint compared to just 32 for Gonzaga. They were 9 of 29 from 3, and they should have been better than that. They missed a lot of wide open 3-pointers that if they'd knocked them down, we'd be having a very different conversation right now. Other not so good things from this game, Ben Gregg was a complete non-factor. He had a nice stretch early in the second half, and that was it. He only played 11 minutes. So if he's going to continue to be a starter for this team, which, again, we'll see if Gonzaga makes a change there or not, Michael Ajayi is clearly playing more than him and playing better than him. Ben Gregg finished this game with just 2 points. He was 1 of 4 from the field, including 0 of 3 from 3-point land. He had 3 boards and an assist and 1 turnover. A couple times this year now, he's tried to make that entry pass to Graham Ike and just way overthrown it. And that's what happened early in this one. He had a 3-point attempt blocked by Jaden Quintance. Just wasn't a factor in this game and ultimately didn't play for the majority of the second half. Nolan Hickman was 1 of 6 from 3 in this game. No bad attempts, just had a lot of wide open looks that he just didn't make. That's going to happen. If he was taking bad shots or continuing to force them, that would be a different conversation. But he was in the flow of the offense, taking shots that he normally takes and normally makes, and he just wasn't knocking them down today. It was a rough night for him offensively. It happens. Other things, we kind of touched on this in the defensive conversation, but Gonzaga really struggled with the length and the size of this Arizona State team. That happened against USC in the exhibition game as well, where they struggled with USC's size, particularly from their guards. Baylor was really small, and they started a too big lineup, but this Baylor team is not big. And Gonzaga, if they're going to continue to struggle with teams that have length and size, that could be a problem for them going forward this season. You can't just get bigger. So they're going to have to figure out ways to mitigate some of those advantages other teams that have more length and more size, particularly in the backcourt. Gonzaga's going to have to find ways to fix that because that could present itself as an issue. The Zags were also only 1 of 2 from the free throw line in the first half of this game. They finished the game 18 of 22. So we're not going to complain about the free throw shooting. And the percentage is great, obviously, but only 2 free throw attempts in the first half of this game. That's a problem. Gonzaga's got to get better at getting downhill. They got to get better at getting to the line with their bigs. Graham Ike was the only player who attempted free throws in the first half. So something for them to work on is to get more attempts at the free throw line going forward. Well, like we said, Braden Huff and Gonzaga's bench got it done in this game, particularly in the first half. Really needed them to step up, and they knocked it out of the park. We're going to talk about that, Gonzaga's three-point shooting, and more coming up here in just a second. Right after I tell you folks about FanDuel, get ready to tackle the college hoops action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything that you need to place live bets all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. And look, it wasn't pretty, but if you're still a believer in Gonzaga, and specifically if you're a believer in that Battle for Atlantis tournament that's coming up, the Zags are right now at plus 135 odds to win that Atlantis trophy. If you like those odds, you like some other game odds that are coming up, visit FanDuel.com to join today. As a reminder, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. And as we do here so often in these review episodes, talking about games, we always talk about the good and the bad in the first segment from each game. And then we try to recap the 5 keys to victory, 5 things to watch that we talk about in the preview episodes. For this episode, we laid out 5 things that we were going to be watching for in this game against Arizona State. I'm going to tell you right now, number 4 and number 5, we're not going to talk about them. Number 4 was which of the deeper bench players outside of the 8-man rotation are we going to see in this game? Answer, none. Gonzaga played 8 players. They did not play Innocente. They did not play Diani. They did not play Yo. Those guys didn't play. Number 5 was which walk-ons are going to play. Maybe we were a little too optimistic about how this game was going to go. Regardless, those were not things that were relevant to this game, so we're going to focus on the first 3 keys. Key number 1, can Graham Ike bounce back? And I put bounce back in parentheses because that's kind of how I talked about it on Friday's show, because he was criticized for not having a very good game against Baylor. He had 15 and 7 in that game, so I don't think that bouncing back from a 15 and 7 point performance was really what we needed, but a lot of folks were kind of hoping to see him have a better performance. And the answer is no. The answer is no, he didn't. He wasn't as bad as people were making it out to be. I saw people blaming the entire first half on Graham Ike. That's not the case. The Zags basically, they went 3 of 12 from 3 in the first half. That's what the problem was. It wasn't Graham Ike, but he did not have a great game. And he didn't get an opportunity to play very much because of the same issue he had that plagued him last year, which is foul trouble. Graham Ike finished this game with 9 points and 4 rebounds. Now, he shot 4 of 6 from the field. So it's not like he was bricking a bunch of shots. The issues that people were worried about with Graham Ike coming into the season from the exhibition season and even in the Baylor game was that he was missing shots he normally makes. That wasn't really the case in this game. He made a few tough shots. He missed a few tough shots. 4 of 6 from the field, 1 of 2 from the free throw line. Not super alarming, but only getting 6 shot attempts, only grabbing 4 rebounds. That's more of a concern. He also had 3 turnovers. A couple of them were just sloppy. Mishandled a pass, turned and tried to pass to somebody who wasn't open, wasn't a passing lane there. Just mistakes that he wasn't making last year. He has not got off to a very strong start this year. But the main issue for Graham was he picked up 3 fouls. And after he picked up his 3rd foul, there were still 13 and a half minutes left in this game, and he didn't play after that. If around that time, I believe Ben Gregg came out of the game as well, and neither of those guys played the rest of the game. Graham Ike played 14 minutes. This is your Wooden Award, your expected Wooden Award finalist. This guy is on projected All-American teams. He played 14 minutes in a close game. That is a problem. That is a problem. It's a problem for Gonzaga. It's a problem for Ben Gregg. This was the big issue for him last year, was foul trouble. Mark Few does not put up with foul merchants. He does not put up with guys who commit a lot of fouls. That was one of the big issues with Hunter Salas. I watched the Wake Forest game that was before this Gonzaga game. Hunter Salas still commits stupid fouls. Like, he still does it. He played well in this game and Wake Forest won. And I'm not trying to just like bag on him, catch a stray, but like that was an issue. Efton Reed also committed a couple of stupid fouls in this game. Those are two guys who had foul issues at Gonzaga. That's not why they left. That's not why they were run out or anything like that. But Mark Few does not tolerate players who get in foul trouble. If you do, he just benches you. And Gonzaga was able to afford to only play Graham Ike 14 minutes in this game, in a close game, because of how great Braden Huff was. And that was the second key. Can the bench mob remain elite? The bench was a critical part of Gonzaga's win over Baylor. And guess what? They were arguably as critical, if not more critical, in this game against Arizona State. All told, Gonzaga's bench scored 36 of the team's 88 points. That doesn't sound like a huge amount considering, but again, you're talking about 3 out of 8 players who played. So 36 of the 88 points Gonzaga scored were scored by 3 players. That's pretty good, but they were really critical in the first half. 3 players, Dusty Stromer, Michael Ajayi, Braden Huff, had 23 of Gonzaga's 38 first half points. The starting 5 had just 15 first half points for Gonzaga, and they were tied with Arizona State because the bench had 23. Again, the second half, the bench only scored 13 of Gonzaga's 50 points. That's because Caleb Battle finally found himself and had 19 in the second half. Nolan Hickman hit some shots. Ryan Nembhard played well, and that was kind of what led Gonzaga to getting back into this game or remaining in this game, really, and ultimately pulling away. Braden Huff was sensational. 21 points, 5 boards, 9 of 13 shooting. He was 0 of 2 from 3, which means he was 9 of 11 on 2-point shots. 9 of 11 against a good physical Arizona State team. He was great. He still has some issues defensively, but the offense that he gave Gonzaga in this game was critical. Critical. This is perhaps the most important great game he has played. Statistically, it's probably not his best game, although it's fairly close. He had some 21-point, 23-point games last year where he had more rebounds and was just as, if not more efficient. But 21 points on 9 of 13 shooting against a good Arizona State team when Gonzaga needed him to contribute. This is probably the most important game that he has played. He was the MVP for this team, and it wasn't that close. Michael Ajayi had a good game as well. 9 points, 12 rebounds, 2 assists. He played 29 minutes coming off the bench again. He's playing starter minutes, even if he's not actually starting for this team. It wasn't the greatest game, though. He was 4 of 11 from the field, 1 of 3 from 3, which means that he was 3 of 8 on 2-pointers. Not great. He missed a dunk, hung on the rim, got called for a technical foul. It was kind of a nitpicky call, but you got to not do that. Like he needed to know that wasn't a situation for that. Frankly, he should have just laid the ball in instead of going for the dunk. Again, a little nitpicky, but it was a critical moment that could have cost Gonzaga dearly had it not happened. But Ajayi was not great offensively in this game. Again, 9 points on 4 of 11 shooting, but he's a tremendous rebounder. It still just amazes me watching him grab rebounds. He is so tenacious. He has a nose for the basketball. He had 12 of them in this one. He also had 3 steals. Really good on-ball defense. He was not considered a good defender coming into the year based on a lot of the analytics because the analytics had no idea what to make of Pepperdine's atrocious defensive team last year. But let me tell you, Michael Ajayi is a good defensive player. He is a physical player. He's got going to have to work on fouls and things like that, but he is tough. He's tenacious. He's a hellraiser on the glass. He's a good shooter. He's a smart basketball player. He's going to be a huge piece for this team. Dusty Stromer was a little bit quieter in this game, but he did have 6 points on a pair of made threes, both in the first half. He also had 2 assists in 16 minutes. Nice minutes from him. Didn't play much in the second half, but really nice minutes from him, particularly in the first half. And then the other key for Gonzaga that we're going to talk about, the 3-point shooting, 8 of 24 on the night, so 33%. That's not great. It's not horrible, but it's not great. But 2 players really dragged that down. Nolan Hickman was 1 of 6, like we talked about. Ben Gregg was 0 of 3, like we talked about. That means the rest of the team, the other 6 players on Gonzaga's roster, combined shot 7 of 15. That is outstanding. So an off night from Nolan Hickman, a slow start to the season from Ben Gregg. Everywhere else, Gonzaga was very good. Dusty Stromer was 2 of 3, like we said. Caleb Battle was 2 of 6. Michael Ajayi was 1 of 3. Nembhard hit his 1 attempt. Braden Huff was 0 of 2. They were both pretty good attempts, just didn't knock them down. Gonzaga didn't make a 3 until the first 10 minutes of the game when Michael Ajayi made his first and only 3. They were only 3 of 12 in the first half, but they were 5 of 12 in the second half, knocked them down when they needed to. Not overly concerned about Gonzaga's three-point shooting going forward because Nolan Hickman's probably not going to have too many more 1 of 6 nights, but it wasn't a great part of this game. And had they been a little better in that area, it probably wouldn't have been quite as scary of a result going down the stretch. But we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk about Gonzaga's other basketball program, Lisa Fortier and the women's team. They ran into a buzzsaw in Stanford on Sunday, a team that wanted some revenge from last year's butt whooping. They got it and a whole heck of a lot more, but it's a solid learning experience for this young Gonzaga team. We're going to talk about that coming up here in just a second. But first, getting to go to live events, it's the best. Whether it's concerts, whether it's theater, whether it's comedy shows, and finally now, college sports are back. Football's been back for a while. Basketball is now finally here, and I'm so excited to make new memories this college sports season. And folks, great news. When you're getting tickets for this year, GameTime has a new feature called GameTime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. GameTime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so that you do not have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. And right now, you're still looking to go to Gonzaga, Kentucky, Climate Pledge Arena, the Battle in Seattle. You can get 2 tickets in the upper deck for $65 a pop. That's a really good deal against a Kentucky team that's going to be ranked almost certainly by the time that game rolls around. So folks, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app now, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you will get $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download the GameTime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, folks, closing out the show, talking about the other Gonzaga basketball game. Again, we talked about this in the preview episode, 4 straight hour block of Gonzaga basketball on ESPN. The men were on ESPN starting at 2 p.m. The women were on ESPN2. Supposed to start at noon. They ended up getting kicked for a while, but showed up like 12:15 or so. By the time the game was on ESPN2, Gonzaga was already down 26-4 against this Stanford team, and they never really got much closer than that. They ultimately lost 89-58 to the Stanford Cardinal. Again, Tara Vanderveer no longer the coach for Stanford, the winningest coach all time in Division I college basketball history, although she will be passed by Gino Auriemma very soon. He is 1 win behind her right now. But this one was never really that close. Again, Gonzaga beat Stanford last year by 18 points at the McCarthy Athletic Center, and the Stanford team was out for revenge. They remember that, and they said, we do not want that to happen again. We are not going to let this team beat us twice in a row. Of course, Gonzaga replacing 4 of their 5 starters from last year's team, and it showed. This was a young team, a team that doesn't have a lot of experience playing together, and Stanford just put a ton of pressure on them, got a lot of steals, forced them into some bad shot attempts, and picked up a commanding, easy victory in their first season in the ACC. The Cardinals shot 13 of 24 from 3 in this game, 54.5%. That was a huge part of the game, but I do want to talk about some of the good things we saw from this Gonzaga team. Chiefly Allie Turner, new freshman. She had 18 points in Gonzaga's first game against Montana, and guess what? Against Stanford, she had 18 points again. Still coming off the bench, St. Louis native. Was kind of not the most talked about player in this freshman class for Gonzaga, and yet she has been a fantastic player for this team to start out the season. 18.6 rebounds. She was 6 of 10 from the field. She was 4 of 6 from 3. Again, back-to-back games to begin her college basketball career, scoring 18 points. Other good things we saw from Gonzaga, they out-rebounded Stanford in this one, 36-34. Always good to out-rebound a team like Stanford, a team that has a lot of size, a lot of physicality, that has traditionally been one of the better rebounding teams in the country. The Zags also shot 15 of 18, which is 83% from the free throw line. Those were the good things. There wasn't a whole lot of other good things, unfortunately, in this game. The non-Allie Turner players for this team shot 13 of 45. That is just under 29%. 29% from the field for players on Gonzaga not named Allie Turner. They also shot 1 for 11 from 3. 9% from 3, 29% from the field for everybody on this roster combined outside of freshman guard Allie Turner. The starting guards in particular for Gonzaga, who had a tough shoes to fill replacing the Trung twins, who both out of eligibility, as well as Brenda Maxwell. Maxwell and Kaylin Trung both drafted by the WNBA last year. So some big shoes to fill, but the starting trio of guards did not look good in this one. Esther Little, Claire O'Connor, Inez Betancourt. Little and O'Connor are both returners. O'Connor's a sophomore. Little is I believe a junior. Inez Betancourt to transfer from UConn. The three of them combined to go 4 of 17 from the field, 1 of 7 from 3, had 9 combined points, 2 combined assists, and 6 combined turnovers. 2 assists between your 3 starting guards is a problem. It's a problem for this team. Whether Coach Lisa Fortier makes an early season move to bring Allie Turner, again, who has 18 points in each of her first 2 games, into the starting lineup to replace either Little or O'Connor, I don't think it'll be Betancourt. She was very strong in Gonzaga's first game against Montana. Remains to be seen. Certainly not privy to all the information there regarding the starting lineup, but be curious to see if Coach Fortier does make a move there. McKinley Dallin played pretty well off the bench as well. She's more of a forward than she is a guard, but I think Gonzaga could potentially make a move where they start Ejim, Maud Hyvens, as well as McKinley Dallin, and just have a bigger starting lineup. There's some options for Coach Fortier to kind of look into, but again, starting lineup change is not what would have changed the outcome of this 31-point loss to a very good Stanford team. Yvonne Ejim didn't have a great game. 12 points, 8 boards is like a pretty bad game for her, which I think says more about how incredible she typically is. 12 and 8 is not great for your leading scorer and your best player, but it's also not awful. She was 4 of 10 shooting, so not a great shooting day for her, but she did go 4-4 from the free throw line. Just one of those games where when you get blitzed really early, you kind of hang with it as best you can. I mean, Gonzaga was only outscored by 8 in the final 3 quarters of this game, but when you're down 22 after the first quarter, it's just pretty hard to stay up and try to kind of get back into it. And I thought Gonzaga made a nice effort to kind of hang with this game and use it as a learning experience going forward. The Lady Zags' next game is against the other Pac-12 to ACC team, the Golden Bears of Cal. That game will be on November 14th, 6 p.m. at the Kennel. It'll be on ESPN Plus for folks who want to check that one out. Cal's off to a really good start this year. So it might be a potential for the women's team to start the season 1-2, which does not happen very often. We'll see. Cal hasn't played any super great opponents. They're 3-0 on the year. Their closest victory was a 31-point win over San Jose State. They also beat St. Mary's by 32 and Idaho State by 52. As a team, they're shooting about 47% from 3. So the perimeter defense for Gonzaga, which wasn't great in that game against Stanford, is going to have to be better if they want to make sure they avoid a loss here. Sophomore guard Lulu Twidale for Cal has 24 points, 3 boards, and 2 assists per game this season. Senior forward Marta Suarez, a transfer from Tennessee, is averaging 17 and 8. So some talented players on this Cal team. We'll see how Coach Fortier and the women's team can respond, potentially pick up a win against an ACC team and put this Stanford game far in the rearview mirror. It's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Folks, thank you so much for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Tuesday's show, we'll talk about the AP poll when that comes out. We'll also do some mailbag questions as well. No more games this week until Friday when Gonzaga takes on UMass Lowell. We'll have a preview for that game, and then we'll also get you ready, of course, for San Diego State next Monday as well. Thanks again, folks, for listening, and until next time, as always, go Zags.